So thank you everyone for coming today. What we're going to cover, it's about an hour. First, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview on the EDGE project, the self-development group. And I'm also going to introduce you to Eric, who will be hosting one of the first workshops that will be held here in Malta. But just briefly to give you a little bit of a scope of why we all started this group and what the EDGE self-development group kind of represents. I've always been in the field of psychology and spirituality for over 2 decades. I always had an inkling of searching the unknown per se, and going to many seminars and webinars all around the world. I found that it helped me a lot. Okay, so what I want to give back to society is the same thing. Okay, but what I had to do, I had to go, separately, meeting different individuals and meeting many self-proclaimed gurus. Some were good, and then I found some that were really good and were beneficial towards me, towards my life. So what I decided with a group of partners over here that are in the call to start a platform, a forum, where we can introduce, individuals such as Eric, to do either webinars or also residential workshops in Malta and all around the world. So individuals will be able to have, a platform that they can, go to should they, desire to advance in any area of their life. Now, what type of self-development that we're talking about, it really depends. So some people need, psychology, some people need, motivation, business strategy, spirituality, and this is what the EDGE is going to, support for the whole community. The reason, for me, I'm edging more towards the psychology and the spirituality aspect at the moment in my life. But then I also needed, business training, leadership training. So depending on what you guys really want, the EDGE will support that by introducing either webinars or residential workshops where, you can attend if this is something that interests you. So that's a little bit of a brief overview. There'll be more information about the EDGE, but I do not want to detract on the fantastic workshop that's happening here in September, the 16th and 17th, by Eric Dowsett, who will, give a little bit of a brief introduction of himself, and also his method that he's developed over 35 years. Correct, Eric? Yeah. So I give the mic back to the man. Eric Dowsett is one of my mentors, and it's something that I've used practically on a daily basis, and for me it worked. So he's going to share a little bit about the workshop and his techniques. So thank you. On to you, Eric.
Okay, I'm really not sure where to start. It's a pretty complex sort of a subject.
Yeah.
Basically, the work is about recognizing what's happening in the body with changing emotion, physiology, and different emotions, etc. Understanding what's happening and why it's happening, and through a process, begin to recognize that while you continue to give energy to any aspect of your being, work with emotions for the time being, while you continue to give energy to any emotion, that emotion will continue to dominate your reality. Very simply put, when a trigger or a memory arises, there's a neurological reaction which creates certain chemicals in the brain, which then get processed through the hypothalamus, become amino acids, enter the body. These little amino acids then enter the cell, and then we describe that as an emotion. While we continue to identify with phenomena like the emotion, anxiety, frustration, anger, fear, judgment, whatever, we will continue to allow the brain to produce chemicals, and so the feeling becomes really quite intense. And then of course, we're in full reaction mode. And very often that will happen on a subconscious level. It's not often that you can be really, truly conscious of this process without some practice. So it happens on a subconscious level. And then, of course, if the chemicals are uncomfortable, if we judge them to be uncomfortable chemicals, we tend to blame the environment or other people in the environment, and which just aggravates the situation, because then we put more energy into that particular emotion. We become that emotion, we transmit that emotion, and we affect everybody around us. So trying to have a reasonable conversation with anyone while we still have all of this information stored in what Jung called the shadow, I refer to it as the backpack, while we still have all of that information stored, then we will remain a victim to the past, unable to see clearly or move forward in a clear and balanced way. So my work has been, whether it's been looking at environmental energies or personal energies, it's been noticing how my body responds to certain situations, recognizing what's happening in those situations, stop feeding the chemical by simply saying, this is the feeling of, rather than I am. And that's critical to the work, because if you keep saying I am, then you're just producing more chemicals, which create a stronger feeling, a more intense feeling in the body. You get lost, you become a victim, and you continue down that same old path. But because I've been able to, mainly through space clearing, but also personal clearing, I've been able to move into an environment to notice how the body responds or reacts when it encounters different environmental energies, earth energies, technological energies, whatever, and recognize that when I step into that energy field, my body physiologically changes. So I can step back out of the field and the body goes back into a sort of a neutral place. So I know that those feelings that I was experiencing as a result of that weren't mine. They were just how my body was trained to respond or react to various stimuli. That allowed me to not take personally, which I noticed, to not judge, not blame. And so I was able to simply accept the feeling. But then in the acceptance, and this is key to the work as well, of course, in the acceptance, I was able to let go of any association with that feeling. But it also allowed my system to embrace more information. So if you can imagine that the world we live in is just energy, it's information, it's frequencies which our nervous system interpret as form, sound, color, taste, touch, etc. But there's not ours. The feelings as such, we may believe that the feelings are ours because we've identified with them for many, many years, but in actual fact, they're not ours. They're just information passing through our awareness. It's only when we continue to identify with them that we believe they're ours. So a subconscious program's been running in the background all of your life, where you have been told that you are this, you are that, these are your feelings, these are my feelings, and so on. And so you've been conditioned to identify strongly with all of these emotions, yet none of them are actually belong to you. And when you recognize this and you can truly understand it, it's very liberating for you, of course, but it's also very beneficial for anyone in your environment, whether that's home and family or work environment. So you start to develop a very different relationship with the people around you as a result of the changes that you make within yourself. We'll be exploring that, of course, and how to do it, more importantly, in the weekend, the workshop. But it's a very simple process. It's very effective, very powerful. But for most people, it's probably too simple. They look for more complex answers. Yet if you understand the simplicity and you can embrace this way of being, then life becomes so much easier. You cease to experience all of the speed bumps. Life flows without effort. unfolds, the path unfolds in front of you without any blame or judgment, and your reality shifts dramatically. So,
Okay. So what would, the individuals that choose to come to this workshop, what could they expect after the workshop?
after the workshop. Well, having come to the workshop, one of the things that becomes available is a community, a global community of people who can support you, who can offer you help, and you can offer them help. So you become a part of a community that's mostly held together through internet and process. But if you practice, and this, I mean, it's like anything, you didn't get where you are in life today, wherever that may be, without a significant amount of practice. No matter what job you take, there's a lot of learning involved, a lot of practice involved, and this is certainly no different. If you don't practice, then nothing will happen. I mean, basically the same as anything.
Mm-hmm.
But if the work resonates with you, if you can understand and feel that this could work for you, then you will practice, and there's a lot of opportunities to help you practice. Then things start to settle down. You may go through old patterns, old emotions as they arise, because you stop running away from them, you stop trying to control them, but you should at the same time develop the capacity, the ability to process them in a very different way, so they no longer are harmful, no longer destructive.
Okay, interesting. You were talking about the shadow from Jung. So and then you went, in your own wording, the backpack. So what does it make a difference to me if I want to build a career or build a family? How is that going to benefit me in context?
Okay. Jung referred to the shadow as aspects of our lives, ourselves, that we've yet to embrace. So depending on where and when you were born and how you were brought up, invariably there's some degree of trauma or conditioning involved. And this happens at a very, very early age, when you're not in a judgmental state, when your brain is actually in a very different state, and it just receives information like a sponge.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the information could be setting you up for quite a traumatic experience in life. So when information that you have judged as a result of your conditioning to be uncomfortable or unpleasant, you tend to deny it, you push it away, you stuff it in the backpack, and to deal with at a later date, of course. But then mañana never comes around, a later date never arises, you never process it, and all of the while, this unresolved business, this unloved aspect of the self, is driving you in different directions. So this becomes conflict within the self. So you might have grand ideas of where you'd like to be and what you'd like to do, whether that's with family or business. But if you've got information stored in the backpack, in the shadow, that is still unresolved, then it's going to sabotage all of those efforts. It's going to set up blocks. It's going to set up resistance. It's going to set up diversions. It's going to try and create distractions. And all the time you're in a sense battling with the self to try to achieve the goals that you're looking for. When you can understand what's happening, when you can realize that a lot of the charge, the drive, the resistance, the blocks, the struggles that you have are simply because there are aspects of the self that have not yet been embraced, and then you find a way that you can easily, comfortably, safely embrace those charges without confronting them, because confronting the self is just doomed to failure, because you're going to be beating yourself up all day and not actually getting anywhere. When you can find a way that you can actually embrace these patterns from the past, then you cease to be a victim to the past. You learn how to respond in a very mature, comfortable, safe way. And this is an energy then that you transmit, which is going to be all about the energy that you're putting out and you'll meet that energy. Instead of meeting conflict everywhere you go, because you're still carrying conflict in the backpack, you will meet a lot more harmony, a lot more comfort. So it's going to make life very different in personal relationships, whether that's at home or at work.
Okay, so maybe I wanted to park my shadow, right? Maybe in this life I just want to leave it there, and I want to continue building my career, you know, in you know, with challenges and so forth. I mean, is that something that a person can do, or will this, you know, you will kind of meet it somehow in your life?
Well, I mean, you can run, but you can't hide, Matthew.
Sure.
It doesn't matter how fast the aeroplane is, you're going to take the shadow everywhere you go. It's not something you can just simply let go of. For the main reason is that most people don't even realize they've got one. Most people don't realize that the conflicts they are experiencing in life, the struggles that they're experiencing, are a product of their own creation, not conscious creation, very much a subconscious creation. And until you can actually understand that, you're going to be a victim to it.
Okay, so I come from a psychotherapeutic background and also psychology. What's the difference between your method? I mean, you're meeting the shadow. Okay, Jungian talks about it, right? And where is the line which is different from your methods that you're going to be, you know, sharing
You
with
don't
us?
want to hear my opinion on psychotherapy, that's for sure.
We would, you know, we would love to hear your opinion.
No, you don't. Not on live TV.
Okay.
All
right.
The difference,
yeah,
as far as I know, because I haven't studied psychology, I'm not really interested in psychotherapy. From what I hear, people in that field want you to go back into the drama to understand it, to sort of sit with it and work through it. My understanding is that the drama has no basis in reality whatsoever. It's a product of the mind that's only kept alive by the energy we continue to give it. And so if it's a subconscious program, then of course we don't know about it. It's hidden in the past, in the shadow. We just are driven by that. We remain victims to that. But when we start to recognize that everything in our experience arises out of the energy that we've given it, if we stop giving it energy, it will die. I mean, if you've got a dog and you shut it in the bedroom for 3 months and you don't feed it, the poor dog's going to die.
But the dog dies.
What's
Okay,
that?
now I said the dog dies. So what you're saying here, in a nutshell, for me to understand, is, you know, we go into a room with a therapist, you know, and we're energizing that, and we're getting certain. What we usually like to do is manage that. Whereas what you're saying is, you know, actually somehow through certain techniques is face it, don't identify with it, and it will not have any energy. Am I going on the right track here?
Not face it. No.
Okay.
You know, I mean, A, if you don't know you've got something,
Sure.
you're never going to face it. B, if that which you're not facing is causing you to be feeling insecure, so not safe in certain areas, then you're not going to go there. If you're not safe, you're not going to go there. But then to say this is real, what can I do about it, is actually giving energy to the problem. If you don't, I mean, without clearing, we don't approach major life issues, big problems head on, because that's assuming that this problem actually exists and it's real. In my understanding, it's not real. It's only real if we keep giving it energy. So we've got to work out ways to deflate the balloon in a safe and gentle manner. So if you've got a problem and you face it head on, you keep just beating yourself up, because who's fighting who? Who's trying to beat who? Who's trying to understand what? If you, from clearing point of view, what we do, we come at it from a different angle. We start clearing all sorts of phenomena. We change our relationship with all information, not just the information contained which we think we're challenged by, but all information. And as we gradually change our relationship to all information, the heart, which is the main organ for taking all this information, starts to feel safer, the safer the heart feels, the more information it can collapse. And then it comes a point when you get so used to that process, so good at that process of not giving energy to that which you notice, this problem all of a sudden no longer exists, because you have changed the way the brain is dealing with information. And so it doesn't see this as a problem anymore. It just sees this as another frequency pattern that it can embrace. So you don't actually have to deal with or face whatever you are concerned about. You just approach it from a very oblique angle. It's a lot safer, a lot more comfortable. It may be a bit slower, but you don't even know you're doing it most of the time, because you're dealing with everyday feelings. You're not dealing with major issues. And because you're dealing with everyday feelings, you're not challenged. No one's pressing your buttons. You're not being forced into confrontation. Instead, your system starts to relax. It starts to feel safer with a broader range of information, which includes whatever you thought was a challenge. And when you start to collapse it on that level, the challenge ceases to exist, because it wasn't real in the first place. You only think it's real as a result of a symptom, as a result of the years and years and years that you've been subconsciously feeding that challenge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate what you mean by phenomena and collapsing this phenomena? Okay, what does it mean?
Well, if you, I guess a simple example, it was a workshop in Ireland many years ago, where a young woman came to the workshop. She'd been born in this village where we had the workshop, but when she married, she moved to the husband's village. Mm-hmm. So coming back into the village, there was no excuse for her not to go and visit her mother. But mother-daughter, genetically pretty well identical, got the same issues. And so you put the two together, and because they've got the same issues, each is reactive to certain information. And so when the body reacts, the physiological changes are quite huge because of the chemicals in the body. So now the mother's transmitting information, daughter's transmitting information, they clash, they get pushed into a very uncomfortable place. They feel really unsafe. They start screaming, throwing things. They can't spend any time together. This is what happens 9 times out of 10 in relationships, whether you're conscious of it or not. It may not be as extreme as this mother and daughter situation, but it's still happening. Now, the daughter went to visit the mother on the Saturday night. It was a 3-day program, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. She went to visit the mother, and on the Sunday she came in and she had this huge smile on her face. She spent an hour and a half with her mother. She said she could have spent another hour and a half. This was a world record, unknown. The husband sat there all night with his mouth open. He couldn't believe these 2 women were getting on so well. So what was happening? The mother transmits mother energy. There's nothing else she can do. That's who she is. Daughter comes in and she's used to coming into that energy in that room, picking up the transmission of the mother and reacting on a subconscious level. So then her physiology changes. She starts to transmit all this freaking out, fear and whatnot, which is sending it back to the mother. So it's like a game of tennis. You keep hitting the ball back and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger until it becomes so uncomfortable that they just explode. And this is happening. I mean, it's happening in the world, of course. On a global stage, it's not just happening in mother and daughter situation. And so you've got this interaction going on. But on this Saturday, the daughter, having been to 2 days of workshop, came in and she noticed the tension. She noticed the discomfort, but she didn't give it any energy. So she was collapsing in her heart. She was allowing it, but she wasn't feeding it back into that closed system, mother-daughter. So then eventually the mother's energy was able to settle because it wasn't being confronted by a mirror image of itself, basically. And so they were able to communicate in a very comfortable way. So the daughter collapsed the information, the wave of information, the transmission, if you like, that was coming from the mother, instead of feeding it back. And when we can do that, of course, both parties in the room are no longer being aggravated. They're no longer creating more tension and chaos. They start to embrace. They start to relax. They feel safe, and they can communicate. Very simple, but incredibly powerful. But it's going on all the time.
So it's about,
Sorry?
So it's about noticing phenomena before they actually happen. But what if you're like, for, you know, a colleague, there's an argument, you know, you're going to tell the colleague, let me notice this first, okay, because I don't want to, how do you get to that point like this woman did?
Again, you practice.
Okay.
I mean, you either come to a workshop or you get a lot of consult, but you've got to change your understanding of what's going on. So you practice noticing on a daily, moment-by-moment basis, you know. So I could ask the people who are listening in now, and you, Matthew, what do you notice in your body at this point in time? What is happening in the body? And you notice. And then I say to you, well, instead of identifying, giving energy to that, just say this is the feeling of. Take a breath and then put your attention, your focus somewhere else, which then stops the process of the chemical production. So the feeling itself just poof, disappears. But if you kept putting your attention on it, it would grow worse and worse. Very simple.
Very simple, but, you know,
just takes
complicated. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Not really.
At least I complicate it.
Well.
I'm on another level of complication. But anyway, this is neither here nor there. There's a question, before I ask other questions, there's a question here from Alexander. Eric, tell us more how the seminar will look like, some theory and then practice. How will it be organized?
All right. Well, there's a bit of explaining and a bit of stuff on the whiteboard to explain, to understand what's going on and why we respond and react. And then there's a lot of time where we spend actually working in pairs or smaller groups where we sit around and we notice by consciously relaxing, getting the system very still and quiet, and then asking simply to clear the other. Any charge that is available for clearing, and then the person who's doing the clearing notices any physiological change, and they know that change they've noticed only arose when they opened up to clear the energy of the other. So then they know that particular feeling isn't theirs, which means then you don't have to take it home with you. You can let it go. There's a fair bit of practice, obviously, because the goal of the workshop is to get this way of being established in your mind so that you can take it home and practice with it. But there's also a lot of other examples about on a cellular level what happens to the body when you identify with phenomena. I mean, there's a lot of things that do happen and they're not all positive. There's information on what happens to the blood when, like if I were to clear someone, what happens to their blood? And we've done a lot of research on this. I've done research on what happens to the brainwave state when we clear. And it's all pretty obvious that something's going on. It's really, really obvious with the blood. And so there's a lot of support from a medical scientific point of view. But there's also a lot of stories to help people understand. All questions you can imagine get answered to the best of my ability, of course. And so trying to help people understand exactly what's happening and why and what they can do about it. That's how we'll be focusing the whole weekend.
Okay. So from what I'm getting from you is obviously the big theory from, the aspects where you built it, some research that has been done, and practice. The reason for the practice is because the only way on how to, manifest that collapsing that you call is actual practice. So it's getting us into a state.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've traded my magic wand in Australia, but if I had one and I could just put everybody on the head and they'd all of a sudden become enlightened, I'd be very, very rich and probably persecuted by others.
I don't have a magic wand neither, so
Right.
it's all
No,
good.
so the practice, basically, there's a lot of Buddhist philosophy behind all of this.
Okay.
And in the longer programs, I start talking about that a bit more. But one of the basic practices is acceptance. It's simply acceptance of what is, without blame, without judgment, and without identifying with what you notice. But of course, that's such a strange concept for most people. There's got to be a door opening, there's got to be some guidance, some form that you can follow to help that become a reality in your own life. So it's really not about believing me and taking me seriously. It's about, does this resonate? If it does, practice. Make it your truth, not mine.
Right. Okay. We have another question from Facebook, actually. Eric, can you tell something more about shadow aspects? Many times you use this term in your recordings. Wow, that's a big question, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe you wanna say a little bit about that, and then we move forward. The shadow aspect.
Well, shadow, yeah, it's just aspects. I mean, simply put, Jung said that the shadow aspects are areas of the self that we've yet to embrace.
Embrace meaning,
Well,
what,
to bring into the light, to take
okay,
from the darkness into the light. But
right.
because most of these we don't even know we have, we can't. There's nothing to be done about it. If you don't know you've got it, you can't do anything about it. You don't need to understand the shadow, because I think our ability to understand is very limited anyway.
Okay.
But you just have to recognize that there's aspects of self that you're running away from, you're trying to control, you're trying to deny, that tend to sabotage different aspects of your life. So these are just aspects of the self that we've yet to embrace. And they could have arisen from, they could be genetic, they could be the forces that are driving us that we've inherited from our ancestral line. They could be experiences that we've had personally that we've judged as being really uncomfortable, so we don't want to deal with that. We can't deal with it. Maybe we'll deal with it tomorrow. So instead we put it in the backpack. And then this just adds charge, which is, I mean, I can go on forever on this one, because it has a huge amount of charge and it has a huge amount of control over who we think we are. In fact, many of the jobs that we choose, the life's path that we take, the partners that we choose, are driven by the subconscious. So we're not really conscious of moving into situations. And I got a few stories on that, but we'll wait and see who shows up in September for those stories.
Okay. So ultimately, this from what you've been talking about, in a couple of minutes here, is generating that type of awareness, noticing certain phenomena. Okay, and what happens automatically within yourself and also on a cellular level. Okay, you start to recognize, you expand, and then you will be able to start to make real choices within your life. Now, this doesn't happen in a weekend, right? Okay, this is, I suppose,
not.
okay. It's very important for the audience to know this.
Yeah.
But okay, so if you had to say it in a couple of sentences, the benefit, okay, of this workshop, would you be able to do that right now?
Well, it benefits a direct relationship to how much you practice, to how much energy you put into something. I mean, if you fancy being an architect, you don't go for an architect school for a weekend and become an architect.
Sure.
You've got to apply yourself, you've got to practice. And it's the same with clearing. If you don't practice, you're not going to get any benefits. But if you do practice, then life starts to become much more comfortable, less conflict involved. And that conflict is internal or external. Less monkey mind, less busy mind, less polarized consciousness, less subconscious judgments that you project into the world. And I often use a poem by a Greek guy, Constantine Cavafy, who died in way back when. I think he wrote this in 1911, the poem called Ithaca, where and it's brilliant. Everybody should read it if you want to understand this work, because he talks about using Greek mythology. He talks about the demons, the Lestrygonians, the Cyclops, and the angry Poseidon. And he said, do not fear them. You will not meet such as these on your path if your soul does not carry them, if your heart does not put them forward. So if you don't have them within you, and mostly they're here, they're backpacks, so you don't know you've got them, but you keep meeting them on the road. And then you have to do battle with them. You have to come to terms. You have to find ways to deal with them, to manipulate, to manage, to feel safe. And you spend a huge amount of energy doing that. I've noticed as a result of my space clearing, I've come across some what most people would consider very, very dark, heavy energy.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you do with that? You run away screaming, hide under the bed. You sort of get thee behind me, Satan, all this bullshit. Instead, I just take it. I just collapse it in here. I just sit with it and let it be. I don't judge it. I don't blame it. I'm not afraid of it because I understand it. It's just energy. It's just information. My fear can manifest all sorts of demons, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But when I collapse that particular frequency pattern of that particular dark energy, whatever, then I never meet it again. I don't have to battle with it. I don't have to deal with it. I never meet it. So as we bring this into the light, embrace all of those chemicals, those feelings, those frequencies, then we won't meet them again. Life becomes so much easier, more comfortable, more relaxed, safer.
Okay. Amazing. So I have somebody asked, could you write down the name of the book? I'm not sure if it's a book, the poem.
Which book? The poem?
It's not a book, is it?
No.
Or is it from a book? I don't know.
No, the name of the poem is Ithaca.
Yeah.
And the author is, and it's on the web, you can get it. Oops. In many translations. If you're not happy with English, there are plenty more you can. Okay. The poem is really, really very, very good. There are 3 major verses. I've only gave you 3 lines from the first verse, but if you're on this journey, it will really, if you understand it, give great clarity to what's going on and why. And the clearing is the path, the process that you can employ, and it's one of the few, in fact probably the only one that I've ever found, and I've been doing this for 35 years. I've been talking, invited to speak at many conferences all around the world, and I've never heard anybody come close to talking about this from this point of view. Most people are still involved in trying to do something about a problem. So they've automatically believed that there's a problem. What can we do about it? I come from a very different point of view completely. There is no problem. There is nothing to do about it. All you need to do is learn to accept phenomena within yourself without blame, judgment, or identifying.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Eric. Before I conclude, guys, does anybody have any questions? You can unmute yourself or write it down. I see that somebody's typing now. Let's see what that will be. So whilst the person is writing it down, just going to give you a little bit of aesthetics of the workshop. So it's the 16th, 17th at the Intercontinental Malta. You will have coffees, drinks, refreshments all day long. Lunch is included, and then also on the Sunday there is like a networking, receptions, drinks after the workshop, so we can all communicate together, all included within the investment for the workshop. Okay. Eric is going to be here a whole week. It's also an opportunity. I haven't told Eric this yet, but if you want to do a one-to-one, you're more than welcome. Just letting you know, Eric, that's a possibility. So that's the aesthetics there. If anybody doesn't have any more questions, I don't know, there was a person that's writing, but it stopped. I believe that we can conclude for today. We have a big question. Question from marketing. Okay, so we have a marketing guy who asks a question. Why these days life seems to be much more complicated for many people? Is it because people are overwhelmed with daily tasks, information, bad news from TV, scrolling social media? Okay.
Oof, I don't know if, I mean, we believe it to be more complicated now simply because of the internet and social media, where information is readily available to everybody anywhere, and most of the information on social media is just totally unreliable, but people follow it because for whatever reason. And so there's a lot more awareness of what's going on now than there ever has been. I don't think it's necessarily more complicated, although the more technology becomes available, the more we give our power over to technology, the life becomes busier.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more pressure these days. And from my understanding, if we get into talking about the mind, there's a lot more information that's available, which is incredibly confusing. It's put a lot of pressure on people. I could blame this or that, but I don't think there's anything necessarily to blame. I think it's just a part of the process of evolution that we're going through. And because people still take themselves way too seriously. They identify with all sorts of phenomena. They're worried about this, they're worried about that. And, you think maybe they've got reason to be worried, but that's not necessarily true if the worry is still a symptom of something else, of their own misunderstanding of the true nature of who they are. So I don't know that there's any one reason. I think we become more conscious of complications because of social media and the web and all this information that's available to us now. Could have been happening forever, but no one knew about it.
Very interesting. But my 2 cents on this, I've been to your workshops and I did realize certain patterns that I was contributing to the mess of my life. Okay. Now, because obviously we like to judge ourselves, especially myself. So, the certain techniques that I have, okay, practice, and you do need to practice like anything else, created some awareness. Another question, are there any emotions in clearing system? I'm not sure. Can you elaborate on that, Alexander? Are there any emotions in clearing systems? Are you talking about emotional phenomena?
Without getting into the physiology, what goes on a cellular level, it's very difficult to describe, and certainly in just a few words. This is why we take a whole weekend to do it.
Yeah.
But when you notice an emotion, if the emotion arises in you without your conscious participation, so it's a reaction from something that's hidden in the backpack, and the body becomes emotive very, very quickly without any control whatsoever, well, then that's not necessarily a positive thing. If we notice the emotion and we can stop feeding it, this is only a step along the way. This is only a stage of the journey. The idea is not to make you into a zombie, but to help you understand and bring balance back into your life before you move into another stage of understanding where you do notice emotions, but you don't get lost in them.
To conclude, okay, everybody that's here, if you do need further information, what's going to happen when Eric is here, okay, on the Wednesday prior to the workshop, we're also going to do another residential, okay, Q&A session like we did today, right? So if you want to share it, okay, with individuals,
online, or is it going to be in person?
Residential, yeah.
Well, residential means
Local.
living. Live, you mean?
Live.
Face to face.
Okay, live, face to face. So if you do come up with more questions, you can always ask the Edge group. But if you have more questions for Eric, okay, he will be there a week before. There's going to be a live Q&A session on Wednesday prior to the weekend, okay, of the seminar. Okay. With that said, if anybody doesn't have any more questions, really thank you, everybody, because I know everybody's busy for taking the time to join us today. And we hope to see you soon, somewhere. Definitely at the workshop.
Thanks, Matthew, and thanks everybody for showing up. Look forward to putting some faces to these names one day.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much, guys. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, evening, or wherever you are in the world listening in to this. Okay.
Thanks. Bye, folks.
Guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.